Hi, my name is Ray Morris, and today I will be giving a syntax presentation on time expression in Chinese, as long as an aside into location expression in Chinese as well. We will start by looking at the basic phase structure of both English and Chinese, and we will also have a focus in the Beijing dialect of Mandarin Chinese specifically. So starting with the basic phrase structure of English, SVO is the basic phrase structure of English. Subject, verb, object. If we look at a simple sentence like, I love you, we can see that this follows SVO very clearly. I is the subject, love is the verb, you is the object. Moving on to Mandarin Chinese, we'll find that surprisingly, Mandarin Chinese follows SVO as well. So if we just compare the simple sentence of I love you and directly translate it into Mandarin Chinese, we will see 我爱你 or I love you, which again directly translates into English. However, sentences unfortunately aren't often as simple as I love you and involve a lot more words in them. So the presentation is on time expression in Chinese, and so we're going to focus on time expression in English first to get a good base understanding of what that looks like. More complex sentences allow for more freedom of movement when it comes to not only time expressions, but a plethora of other expressions in English as well. As you can see by the three example sentences I've presented here, I rented a book at the library yesterday. Yesterday, I rented a book at the library, and I rented a book yesterday at the library. You can clearly see the position of the yesterday in each individual sentence and its place. All three of these sentences are considered grammatically correct in English and also portray the information that somebody rented a book at the library. They didn't do it today, they didn't do it tomorrow, they did it yesterday. So if we compare these sentences in Chinese as far as direct translations go, we will clearly see that in Chinese, these time expressions do not have the same liberties they do as in English. So taking a look at the first example sentence in Chinese here, 我昨天在图书馆租了一本书. I, yesterday, from library, rented a book, would be the direct translation. With it meaning, I rented a book from the library yesterday. This would be grammatically correct in Chinese, and if you actually take a closer look at the sentence, you can see it more closely resembles the English sentence B3 than B1, which is what we would assume if we were just taking all three sentences and looking at them directly as far as a direct translation. So for B1, we see, I rented a book at the, For a B3, we see, I rented a book yesterday at the library. When we look at this sentence, we see, I yesterday from library rented a book. They're very similarly structured, and they're both correct in each's respective grammar. So if we move on to the second sentence, 昨天我在图书馆租了一本书. Yesterday, I, from library, rented a book. Or, yesterday, I rented a book from the library. Again, we can see that the sentence in B2 doesn't exactly match up to its direct translation counterpart in B2 for English, yet they still represent similar phrasing and also similar understanding of the meaning. So one would think we would be able to do the exact same thing for time expression in Mandarin as we do for English and put yesterday or the time expression at the end of the sentence. However, a sentence like 我在图书馆读了一遍书昨天. I from library rented a book yesterday is actually grammatically incorrect in Chinese. Despite its direct translation appearing the most like B1 in English. So if we go back, we can read, I from library rented a book yesterday. And we can see, I rented a book at the library yesterday as a direct parallel between the two sentences. However, one of them is grammatically correct in English and one of them is not in Chinese. So why? Why are we not allowed to put time expression at the end of a sentence in Chinese? Well, time words can appear in one of two positions in the sentence order of Chinese. Beginning of the sentence, before the subject, in a time subject verb object order, or they can appear after the subject as a subject time verb object order. Placing a time expression phrase before the direct object of book is also an ungrammatical sentence as well. These sentences also display another interesting difference in reference to the expressions of place as well. But before we jump into that, taking a look back, it's interesting to see that time can only be directly before or after the subject. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but at the same time, it is an interesting distinction and definite difference between English and Chinese and the grammars that they hold. Looking at expressions of place, just thinking right now amongst yourselves, if this were a live presentation, I would ask the class where they think place expression can go in Mandarin Chinese. If it would be either have to be connected to the subject, similarly to time, or if it would be free to move around wherever, like it is in English. Or if there's maybe a third restriction that they think, a combination of sorts. Because there's no class, I will just tell what I assumed. I assumed that place expressions would have very similar rules to time expressions as well, and be restricted through their use of, their connection to the subject. However, we will find out through place expression in English. Place can be expressed similarly enough to time in English. Taking a look at these slightly simplified sentences to focus on place instead, we can read, yesterday I rented a book at the library. Yesterday at the library I rented a book, and I rented it at the library a book yesterday. Now, it can be noted that all of these sentences are grammatically correct, just like before, and they also share the same similarity of having yesterday, at the library, the location term, be placed at different parts of the sentence, much like yesterday was for the beginning time expression examples. Time and location words in English act very similarly, although place words tend to be placed after the verb in English. So for example, yesterday I rented a book at the library. C1, out of all the three given sentences, it's probably the most common way to say this phrase, although it is still grammatically correct to have place words be after the verb in English. It just might sound more uncommon or unusual to a native speaker. When expressing place in Chinese, however, these rules are more rigid, much similarly to time expression. To indicate the location that a verb takes place in, zai, followed by a location, comes before the verb. So we can see the ordering be subject, zai, place, verb, and object. Note that the place expression is located before the verb in Chinese, whereas in English it generally appears afterwards. This feels similarly to time expression in Chinese, in that place expressions cannot be after the verb, despite being able to do both in English. When I initially first looked at the subject zai, place, verb, object, I initially thought that place was connected through zai to the subject. However, I realized afterward that zai and the place expression must actually come before the verb, and that is how the grammar is constructed in Mandarin Chinese. There's an additional restriction that the place expression must be placed before the verb along with zai, and that is the point that I just now noted. You can take a look at the 3 example sentences in Mandarin Chinese, extrapolate them out, and see if they follow these rules that have been presented. So, starting with C1, we have 昨天我在图书馆租了一本书. Yesterday, I, at library, rented a book. Yesterday, I rented a book at the library. The sentence is grammatically correct, but note how this sentence, again, more closely resembles a different sentence in English with a different direct translation. We have the sentence here, yesterday, I, at library, rented a book, compared to yesterday, at the library, I rented a book. Very, very similar, and both grammatically correct. However, when we move on to example 2, C2, we can see that this is actually an ungrammatical sentence right off the bat. 昨天我租了在图书馆一本书. Yesterday, I rented at library a book. Yesterday, I rented a book at the library. This sentence attempts to mimic English by locating the place expression after the verb. While this mimicry of C2 looks almost identical to C1, as we will see here very shortly. Yesterday, I rented at library a book. Yesterday, I rented a book at the library. These are very similar word orders to each other. However, this sentence is ungrammatical still, and that is due to the placement of the library being after the verb rented. For our final example here, we can see 我租了在图书馆一本书昨天. I rented at library a book yesterday. I rented a book at the library yesterday. This sentence is ungrammatical because the time expression is at the end and the place expression is still after the verb. So this is almost doubly ungrammatical, if that were even a possibility. This sentence, I would argue, appears the most like its English counterparts when directly translated, but is still ungrammatical. So, looking at I rented at library a book yesterday, we can see that that is very close to an English sentence. I rented at the library a book yesterday actually makes it grammatical, just adding one determiner in before the library. The phrase the library, excuse me. And so by this we can see that Mandarin Chinese and English do have very similar phrase structure orders. And because of that, their sentences actually, in a direct translation, seem to line up incredibly well. But when we don't follow specific rules of grammar, we can see that simple switches of placement between a location a place, a time, or even a meaning can completely make a sentence ungrammatical and unintelligible even to somebody who is being spoken to. These sentences were confirmed as being ungrammatical by a native speaker, and that they would still understand the understanding and gist of the meaning, but would be very confused as to when the actual event happened. So, again, there's this situation that occurs where both the time and location words cannot be placed after the verb in Mandarin Chinese. While time expressions have the luxury of appearing before or after the subject, place expressions must be before the verb and after the subject in Mandarin Chinese. Locating a place expression at the head of the sentence is also incorrect as well. There will be no head placement at all. And so this concludes the presentation. I would open the floor up for questions, but seeing as there are none, thank you for this opportunity. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation.